Right? It's the coaching thing is like, hey, let's dive in and let's figure out what it is that's holding you back. And a lot of times it's nuances, but a lot of times it's just what's between the ears.
Hello and welcome back to the Grow with Echo podcast. I am here with Chad Bourquin. How you doing, Chad?
Good. Thanks for having me, German.
Well, thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about what you do, where you're from. We're going to jump straight into it. Let's get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I live in Kansas City. Been here a long time. Grew up in a little town called Colby in western Kansas, but I've lived in this city for probably 30 years. I am a guitar player, musician. I have a band. I have an entertainment agency as well. I also do coaching artists, musicians on how to just get more out of their career, how to make more money, as well as doing some keynote concerts.
That's an extensive repertoire you got there. So you have a agency where this agency, does it go hand in hand with the coaching that you do, or is that separate from the coaching?
Well, I mean, everything bleeds over because it's all music.
Right.
I've played music the longest. The next longest thing I've done is the agency. I've had that for, 15 years, probably at least. I actually worked for another agency years ago. That's where I learned that business. The coaching came out of just what I saw as an agent of a need. I
Yeah.
noticed there was a huge amount of artists that were competing and fighting for the same low pay, low level
Yeah.
gigs. And that's always a good place to start if you're new. But some of these artists that were doing this had been around for years. I mean, they were great musicians. They'd been doing this for years, and they were still competing for stuff that was, I don't know how they were surviving on it,
Yeah.
And so, but I started to recognize why over time. One of the biggest things that happened was I picked up this account that was pretty big, and somebody else had this account for years. And when I got the account, the previous agent sent out a letter. This was before there was email, but they weren't using it. They sent out a physical letter to all the bands saying, "Hey, we don't have this anymore. Call the venue that I was representing, and if you want to play there." So they started calling this venue all within 2 to 3 days, because that's when they all got the letter at the same time. Well, the venue instantly rerouted them to me. I had no idea any of this was going to happen. And I got like 50 calls in 2 days from bands.
Wow.
And I heard some of the worst pitches I'd ever heard in my life. Some of them were flat out like threatening me, saying, "I've been doing this for years. You'd better keep booking me." I'm like, if this is your tactic, it needs some work, right?
Yeah.
Because that doesn't work.
I bet, yeah.
They were the first ones I marked off the list.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to work with people like that. But then there were some that were, they were okay, but they would start in, and all they would do, they wouldn't even let me get a word in edgewise. They would start in telling me all the reasons they were great.
Mm-hmm.
And so over time, I had enough of that to realize is like, okay, everybody that's telling me they're that great, and it sounds like they're desperate, it's probably for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting booked. So then contrast that with, I had clients start asking for a different set of groups that were not any of these people. They were asking for these groups, and I was reaching out to this what we'll call them like A-level groups here in town, and they were giving me prices that were 5, 6, 7 times what these other groups were paying, and they weren't willing to budge. This is what we get. This is what we do it for,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was having this major contrast, like the ones that had put the time in, had developed the business and all that, did not need me. They didn't need any gigs I was booking, but if I wanted to book them on something, they were there. And they were actually really good to work with, great business people and all that. And so there was this, like I said, this hard contrast between starving, even on a local level, between starting off artist and this just level of groups that just had figured a few things out.
Yeah.
And so during COVID, we all had time on our hands. And I started a mastermind just because I had a feeling like when we come out of this, it's gonna explode. And so I started this mastermind with one guy,
Yeah.
and we just started talking about the things that we wanted to do to prepare for when it did open back up. And then had some other people join. And then I started getting some regular people showing up every week on this deal, and we were just talked and learned and grew. And and when we came out of it, those artists really did well. They were
Mm.
ready. They knew what to do, and still to this day, they're as busy as they want to be.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's I love how you are the type of guy that can go into that space and have that awareness because, you're a musician yourself and you started off doing the music. And then these other bands, at least relatively speaking, are doing the same thing. They're also musicians that have been doing it for a long time. The key difference, though, is that you noticed the subtle changes between the different bands because it's not like some bands are in it for years and years and years. And I bet they can look at, what they're doing. They say, well, this has been working for us. We get booked in some places, but they don't know how far they can go. Right. And I think
Right.
that's not just a trend. Think about it this way. If the artists within the industry don't know how far they can go, then people outside of the industry, the people that say things like the starving artist, like you mentioned, or they say the
Mhm.
classic, there's no money in music anymore, right? It's like they don't know either. So how much less would they know if the artists within the industry don't know what you know now? And so I think your creation of the agency, understanding the levers that you can pull and push to get to that level has probably helped so many artists. So, you have this agency and tell me a little bit about the model. I'm trying to get a grasp on it. So do you
Sure.
do you said it's like coaching. So you do one-on-one coaching, or is this more of like a booking agency? I'm going to reach out to the vendor for you, see if they want to book you, put you together.
Yeah.
Tell me a
So
little bit
those are
about that.
actually two different things, and I do both of
Mm.
them.
Okay,
Yeah. So
excellent.
the agency is one of those deals where we don't really rep any artist directly, with the exception of we just brought on a couple like about a year ago. But other than
Mm.
that, we represent the purchaser or the client. So we kind of got our niche early on in a lot of the shopping center concerts where they do a lot of these concert series every year. But then from there it grew because they continued to refer us to other ones, and then they referred us to other ones, and we rep most of the shopping centers here in town, the big ones.
Yeah.
But then cities, events, and all kinds of things came from that. So that's one section of our business where they say we want this many groups over this amount of time, and this is the budget we have to work with, and who do you got? So that's the sort of thing. So then the coaching, that's completely separate in the fact that it's not. I mean, you don't. It's not a pay to play thing. You don't get
Yeah.
it's not like if you pay me to get coached, you're going to get booked. It's not that sort
Mm.
of thing, right? It's the coaching thing is like, hey, let's dive in and let's figure out what it is that's holding you back. And a lot of times it's nuances, but a lot of times it's just what's between the ears. And this is not something that I just have always known. The reason I'm able to do this is because I was at the same point years ago,
Yeah.
and I've had to get coaching myself. I had 3 years with what I thought was just going to be a vocal coach, turned into way more than that. I mean, I owe a lot to that person.
Mm.
His name's Robert Arthur. He just, in fact, my first lesson I went to get vocal coaching was I get there and we just start talking, and we get to about where we're 5 minutes from the end of the lesson. I haven't sang a note yet. And And then he has me sing a little something, and then we're done. And I come
Yeah.
back the next week, and it's the same thing. I'm like, what is going on here? I don't feel like I'm learning anything. That went on for a while. And
Yeah.
I finally figured out what was going on over time. I had to learn to fix what was in my before we could ever deal with what was going on with my voice
Mm.
from that area. And so there's that. And then my brother and I had also another coach that was dealing with a lot of business stuff that we've been meeting with him for probably since we began. So almost 15 years every week, And he was good for a few reasons, not just for our own personal growth, but actually just helping us keep it on the rails sometimes. Because dealing with, we're a two sibling family. It's just him and I.
Yeah.
And there's times where we butt heads, right? So,
Mhm.
and he was there to help us walk through stuff and be that sort of thing. But so that's 15 years with that coach, 3 years with the other. I've put in the time to figure out my own issues. I haven't figured them
Yeah.
all out, but I've put in the time to get at least get to this point. And I remember thinking about it's like before I even started coaching anybody else, I'm like, what gives me the right to feel like I can have an impact on anybody? You
Mm.
know, because I felt like I still got so much stuff I got to work out on my own. And I read this book, and I remember one line out of this book, and this guy goes, because he was this guy writing this book was dealing with the same thing, and he goes, I finally realized it doesn't matter what you know more than somebody else that's willing to pay for that information.
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I suppose I could feel okay charging a little bit for this. So I did.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so low when I started, just so I could
Yeah.
charge something, because I was putting time in. There was time involved, and when I was doing that, I was not doing other things that were making money, and so that went on for a long time. Eventually, I started raising prices and realizing, okay, there's a little more value than what I'm charging here,
Yeah.
and I'm probably still way undercharged compared to what a lot of coaches charge.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm way under, but I'm enjoying it. I love it. It's making a difference in these artists' lives. So I went a little
Yeah.
long on that, but
No, absolutely. I think that that brings up an excellent point there in regards to, you said you had to start somewhere in what you charged. You had to start with, getting your foot in the door
mhm,
with something, and then you go from there. And what you're doing there in the artists' lives, even if you're not at the level of some of your competitors that may be out there, the impact that you're making makes up for the difference. And
right.
that's actually what was going to lead me to my next question, which was, and honestly, you may have already even answered it, but if you want to expand on it, you can. Is you're an agency that will contact the venues, that will get in touch with them, and then you're also going to coach them. You're going to walk them through to, like, you go in and you're like a doctor. Let's figure out what's wrong, and I'm going to give you a prescription, right? And then we're going to
Well,
figure this out together. Um, and so whenever somebody's looking at that, I'd say maybe you're not at the level of some of the coaching competition, but you do have this lateral competition with guys like, companies like Gig Salad or Wedding Pro, and these booking agents that are not necessarily agents, more like a storefront, right? But a musician might look at that and say, like, well, I can get some events here from this place too, and I might even
mhm.
get just as many events from here than if I went with and worked with Chad and his team. It's going to be a lot cheaper for me to go this way, and I'll still get maybe a similar amount of events. So what would you tell that musician that's like on the fence and is thinking, well, should I spend that extra money to get that coaching? What makes that so worthwhile more than what you've already said?
Well, I mean, if you just do the numbers alone, um, most of the time, anybody I've coached makes whatever they've paid me back plus more for the first month, and then it
Oh,
grows from there.
absolutely.
Yeah, there's things that can be done pretty quickly in coaching, especially in the music world, that can help turn things around pretty fast.
Yeah.
And then if they stick with it, then they can get into the real incomes. You know,
Yeah.
the idea of being able to have gigs come to you rather than chase gigs.
There you go. Yeah.
That seems like to most artists, that seems like that's not even possible,
Yeah.
because they feel like they are just chasing all the
Yeah.
and
No,
gigs you have to chase, you will always have to chase.
yeah, absolutely. And I think I like, that idea that, well, what makes this worthwhile? Well, the fact that you won't have to be chasing the gigs.
Yeah,
Because on those storefronts, what are you still doing? You're still having to go in and um, respond to these inquiries and make your storefront attractive, but they're not telling you what it means to be attractive, right? You're
right.
going in there and saying, like, sure, we can help you make your storefront, but let me tell you why it works. And I think that why, those nuances and the experience that you can deliver to your clients is what separates you from all the other storefronts, all the other promotion type companies, because those promotion type companies will get to the musicians that you worked with in your past that are like, well, we've been doing this for so long, and everybody knows us. That it's like, yeah, but nobody wants to hire you, even if they know you and they see you, because you don't understand the nuances that we
Yeah,
do now, right? And so that would make that worthwhile for a musician going and thinking, well, let's go with somebody that can give us the experience like the one that you have.
yeah.
So I think that's, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, you made me
Yeah.
think one thing that a lot of artists don't do, if they would just do, they would see a financial impact pretty quick. And then that is to make sure that to train themselves to have a smile on from the,
Yeah.
well, all the time. But I mean, for sure, from the minute they walk in the gig to the minute they get in their car when they leave.
Yeah.
So many musicians, and myself included, are introverts,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're in our head all the time. We're thinking about many other things other than connecting with people, which that's our main job, ironically, is to
Yeah.
connect with people. And so just fixing that, even I mean, do something as simple as writing on a piece of paper the word smile and putting it below your mic stand just to remind yourself.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm not smiling, that
Yeah. No,
that
I think
turns into
that's
dollars.
I think that's a great point. It's, um, I was a guitarist for some time, and one of the biggest critiques I ever had, when I was up on stage playing, because I would do solo act, just up there. I'm not singing or anything, so really people are just looking at me, listening to what's coming out of the guitar.
Right.
But the number one thing that people would get me on is, why do you look so serious when you're up there? Why are
Yeah.
you so like? Do you not want to be here? And I started realizing I'm like, I'm having the time of my life up here. I am
Sure.
so blessed and so happy that I get to be here playing for all these people, but I look like I'd rather be anywhere else. And that rubs off on people. And I started to notice not only do the coordinators and the venues take note of that, but the audience, whenever you smile at somebody,
Mhm.
their innate reaction is to smile back, right? They don't know what's going to
Yeah.
happen yet. So even if it's just like a nervous smile, they're going to smile back at you. But if you get serious and you make a straight face at somebody, they're going to get thrown off guard. Maybe they're going to change their mood. So setting the tone with that smile,
Yeah.
like you're saying, even something as simple as that is something that maybe a musician won't notice. And so having that coaching is like, that's what a coach does, is he says, okay, like in sports, you say your
Yeah.
footwork's off. You don't feel that your footwork's off,
Right.
but you see the result of that footwork being off. I'm the coach that then tells you, hey, it's because you didn't plant your feet. It's because you were standing the wrong way. In this case, it's because you didn't smile. That's why you
Yeah.
didn't get the reaction that you wanted to get. So those little nuances that you can teach these musicians are, life changing. Like you said, I mean, in the music world, I'm familiar with pricing on gigs and whatnot. If you charge enough, like you said, pretty much for any coaching, you can make that back in 1 to 2 to 3 events,
Yeah.
So if you can tell your clients, I bet you tell them all the time, like, hey, would it be worth it to you if I could, if you one coaching session with me, if I guaranteed you 1 to 2 events, it paid you back what the coaching session costs? I mean, who would say no to that, right? On top of all the extra value that you can add. So it seems like you got quite the model going on. You have the experience. You're not only delivering that in the agency, but also outside, delivering your experience to people that maybe are aspiring musicians. I see here in your coaching that you have, phrases here like developing your inner rock star. I love it. Finding your life instrument, things like that. Like you said, whenever you were taking those vocal lessons, that you had to fix what was up here before you could actually start doing things in your business. So tell me a little bit more about that side of the business, of the mental aspect of things. How has your experience translated into that work?
Well, I mean, that's most of the work we do is the mental.
Yeah.
You know, somebody showing up a lot of times is looking for the magic bullet.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the magic thing I can say to get booked?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not that's not realistic. That's not what it's about. But if I mean, this is such a deep subject, and it takes a time. I mean, I do is spend a lot of time in the coaching sessions just listening to where they're at, what they're dealing with, and and ideally, if a person can come to their own conclusion, it's going to stick faster.
Absolutely.
So even if I see the issue, it's like glaring what the issue is. If I can just be patient and let them and help lead them to figure out their own conclusion, they won't have to keep relearning that lesson. Where sometimes if I just, hey, this is what you're doing,
Yeah.
this is the
Yeah.
problem. And sometimes it goes in, it's like they're like, oh, yeah, that's right, and then they forget it because it didn't really stick.
Yeah.
Where I mean, my, my wife and I have this funny thing because she'll make some kind of suggestion, and then
Yeah.
she might make it again, and she might make it again, and then somebody else comes along and makes the same suggestion. And I was like, "Hey, I got this." I go to her and I got this idea from talking to this guy, and she'll just
Yeah.
look at me like, "Are you kidding me?" You know, I've suggested
Yeah.
this 5 times now, and now you're gonna do it.
Yeah. No,
But that's just
absolutely.
how we work. We sometimes it's got to be the right time for the message.
Mhm.
So people have to be ready.
I was thinking, when you were saying that, it's like, there's a great speaker is, you're probably familiar with him if you're in that space, but his name's Tony Robbins.
Oh yeah.
Big motivational speaker, right?
Yep.
They call him the life coach of life coaches, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, this guy, he has this concept where he talks about, priming right at the beginning of your day. He's doing this exercise. It's almost like a meditation, but really it's just priming his mind and his body for
Yep.
whatever it is that's going to happen that day, right? Because he's got these big things that he has to do. And that concept always stuck with me when thinking about really acting on anything in life. It's like, okay, if you're going to act on this, if you're going to change this part of your business, if you're going to go out and go and take those coaching lessons, are you in a position to receive it? Are you in a position
Mhm.
to actually absorb it and then deliver on what you're trying to do? Because you mentioned your wife is giving you the suggestion, goes in one ear
Yeah.
and out the other. Somebody else says it, and then they know. That's what
Yeah.
I tell my girlfriend. I say, you're not gonna believe it if it's coming from me. Somebody else has got to tell you, right? If
Right.
I tell you 3 or 4 times, you're not going to believe it because you weren't ready to receive it. But maybe with somebody else, or if a doctor actually tells you that that's what's wrong with you in that sense, or a lawyer tells you that we got to do this or that, then you'll understand it. So it's really, are you in a position to receive? Are you in a position to, process that now? And like your vocal coach taught you those years ago, is before I can even start teaching you how to sing, we got to get you in a position to receive it.
Yeah.
So I love that aspect of the business. I was really curious about that. So I think you're doing great work with that and helping these musicians that they don't really think about those things. They think, oh, music's great. I love music. This is all I want to do. It's their passion. I mean, a musician that's there, full time loves what they do. I think I can say that with some confidence because if they didn't, they would be doing anything else because it's not an easy industry to be in.
Yeah.
It does get difficult at times. So, those guys, maybe they are wanting to be in it because it's what they want to do. It's their passion, but they don't understand that there are so many other things that they're not thinking of. And so you help them see those things that they're not thinking of. And so in that, wanting to talk a little bit about the business itself, your clients that you get, do they come to you? Do you go to them? How is it that you've been able to get and keep your clients over the years?
Well, so if I start with the agency side of things, and which
Hmm.
I'll put the band under that because it's kind of the same thing, or the same beliefs philosophies. I never tried to grow this agency. I got
Yeah.
I got my first gig of being the reason I started the agency because I left that world years ago working for another agent. Said this is miserable. I'm not ever going to do this again. And but this lady showed up with a friend on New Year's Eve, and we're hanging out playing Wii, and she's like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I got an idea." And I was like, "Yeah, I think I can help with that." And it was a shopping center here in town that wanted to run this little acoustic thing. I've been out of that forever, but I just helped her get it going. I did 2 things. I honored my word and did what I said I was gonna do, and I was nice. I was nice. I was on nice to her. I was nice to the groups. I was nice to everybody. And that's all I can really point to what I did different than what anybody else might have was doing in town from what I was hearing. Well,
Hmm.
then she referred me to another shopping center, who referred me to another shopping center, and then this first lady ended up moving to a different shopping center. So I mean, I just kept going with them, and then I kept the account that I was already at. So I kept growing from referrals just from being nice and doing what I said I would do. Um, and I also made sure that they got what they wanted. I made sure that the artists that I put in there fit what they were trying to accomplish. So, I didn't just put people in without any thought. I wasn't there just trying to make a check. And so that's what I think has continued to help the agency grow was just those things, paying attention to the little details of what they're looking for and making sure that those happen. With the band, it was kind of the same thing. I mean, we got better over time as musicians, but we would we would always make have a mandate. It's like we're going to make friends with everybody we can on breaks. When we go do shows with festivals, we're going to make a concerted effort to let the techs, the sound crew, the stagehands, everybody know that we appreciate them and we're thankful that, and we're gracious for them because I know that if we're opening for some headliner that may not be happening, it could be
Mm.
completely the opposite of that. And so we've just have always done that with everybody we've worked with that we can. And, you don't know where that all leads. But I guarantee you, being an agent, I learned very quickly how fast people talk about the negative. And if something went wrong or some band did this or somebody did this, it moved through the tech world pretty fast in information. I mean, they
Yeah.
found out about it, and which then I learned this, like I learned how many times purchasers and buyers will ask their production companies what they know about an artist. So a lot of times they could even be gatekeepers, and then they say, oh, that artist is hard to work with, or no, that artist is really easy to work with. They
Yeah.
were great from our perspective. That might be the final thing that made them say, well, okay, we were deciding between these two artists. We're going to go with artist A because the sound company said they were easy to work with,
Yeah.
you know? And so just having that mentality of being courteous, caring for people, doing the right thing is what's helped those grow. From the coaching side of thing, I guess it's kind of been the same thing. It's just been referral. I've done a little bit of marketing, not enough to call it marketing. I've made a decision this year. I was going to try to get a little more active of getting content out. It's like when you reached out to me, it's like, oh, great. This is more content. I need help
Yeah.
getting more content out. So this would be good. And I want the content to be authentic. I don't want to just sit down and just put a camera up and start talking. That's so uncomfortable for me to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but if I'm able to capture what we're already doing, which is what we're doing like right now, then
Hmm.
I think that sort of thing would be helpful. So, yeah, but I mean, that's a long ways from your original question, but the referrals has been the biggest part of it. I've done a little bit of online marketing, but it's been mostly the referrals.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I love the expansion on that question because it reminded me of this saying that I was taught, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was something along the lines of, you know, if you need five good reviews to make up for one bad one,
Yeah.
right? Something like that. It could be more because when people go on, I think of something like Google reviews, right? The
Yeah.
first thing you look up whenever you want to go to a restaurant, or even whenever you're looking up a store, or even bands like musicians and all that, you
Yeah.
first thing you do is you Google them, right? Everybody says, "Oh, well, Google them," right?
Hmm.
So they go on Google, and Google, the first thing that populates on that search tab is Google reviews
Yeah.
or Google search. And people go in there and they'll see, 4.5 stars. And it's 4.5 stars. You think 4.5 stars is pretty good. And they have, 300 reviews. But then when you go in there, you start to wonder, well, what happened to the other zero point 0.5 stars? And then you start
Hmm.
looking at, well, what went wrong with this, right? And,
Our
not
attraction to
everybody's
drama.
like that. But exactly, right? People love to know what's wrong. There's, again, Tony Robbins, he says, you can always find what's good and you can always find what's bad, right? If you look hard
Hmm.
enough, you're going to find both. You find what you look for. And same thing with products on like Amazon, right? You go down, the first thing you look at is the reviews. Is this something that's going to be durable? Is this something that
Yeah.
is going to be consistent? Am I going to like this? And then you look for the bad reviews because you say, well, these good ones, everybody talks good about this, but what are the people saying whenever they're complaining? And so I think absolutely these referrals, word of mouth is so much more powerful than just, being the top search result on Google because
Yeah.
that'll get people in. And like we were talking about earlier, people will see you. Will they want to book you? And more importantly, will they want to book you again? And are they going to tell their friends about it?
Yeah.
Because musicians, I used to call myself a weekend warrior because there's only so many weekends in a month where I can actually go do these events. And, one place will book me one time And if I don't do a good job, they're not going to want to book me again. And then I can't fill up my weekends. I can't fill up my dates because these places don't want me back, or these places,
Mhm.
right? Luckily for me, I was taught that concept early on of like, hey, you want them to book you again. You want them to tell their friends about you, right? And some of the biggest contracts I ever got were from referrals, word of
Yeah.
mouth. So, you say that like now you're trying to make a more, um, a bigger effort to go out and do more marketing, for example. And that is going to be great in addition to what you're already doing, because your network is just going to spread the word for you. And little by little, even one day you decide, you know what, I'm going to step back from this. I'm going to go ahead and retire or hand this off to somebody else. I'm done with the industry for now. I bet you're still going to get people that are going to be like, hey, Chad, can you do this for me? And you're going to have to be like, hey, I don't do that anymore. And you're going to get that until the end of
Yeah.
times, because people are going to want you because you have those referrals. So I think that's a great strategy. It might honestly be the hardest one to pull off. Anybody can create Google ads. Anybody
Uh-huh.
can create marketing for social media. Not everybody can get a solid review. And that's a really important part of it. And what you're doing with your musicians and yourself and your business is, I think, of utmost importance. So you've been doing this for quite some time now. I can tell you have some extensive experience in this. You have that goal to do some more marketing now for your business. Um, because you want to do more marketing, I have to assume that there's got to be some goals. So, where are you looking to be in the next year or so? What are the next steps for Chad Bourquin in his business ventures here? And you can talk about whatever you want to talk about, whether it be the agency, the band, or the coaching, whichever one comes to mind first.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the agency, I'm happy with its growth. It just keeps growing, on its own.
Yeah,
Not that we couldn't use more. I mean, everybody can use more business, I'm sure. But
yeah,
so there's no need for really putting like an effort into that. The band's kind of the same thing. That's even though we've made this a big shift in with the way we're handling singers, it's still this year is going to be as busy as last or better. I think it's even
yeah.
more. Um, but the one thing that I would like to see expand is doing the keynote concerts, and then even like the grow my mastermind more.
Hmm.
Um, I think there's room to help way more artists than what I'm helping now. I just have not put much effort into growing that. I've just done it,
Yeah,
because it's kind of the way I've done everything else. I just do it and then it grows over
yeah.
time. So I've kind of, I've thought about, it's like, well, should I try to push, or should I let that just keep developing like I have everything else? I mean, I don't exactly know the answer to that. But I did figure out, it's like, if I would put more content out, even if they weren't coaching clients, I would at least be helping more people, because
Absolutely.
within the content would be information that would help them.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the answer. Just continue making a difference, whether they're clients or not, and let the rest
Hmm.
of it fall. I don't know. Those are my
Yeah.
uneducated thoughts on that area.
No, I love it. I think that it's probably, one of the best answers I've gotten, because, some people, first thing that comes to mind is we want to hit, X amount of revenue by the end of the year. We want to do this with our clients. We want to get this amount of clients in, and those are great answers, because at the end of the day, it's a business. You have to make your living. You have to pay your employees. You have to help your band and your clients. So those are great goals. But I think what people underestimate is the power of giving and the power of truly having a passion to help people. That's why we started here at Grow with Echo. That's why we started this, because we said, the worst thing that you can do as a musician, as a business owner, as any really just anybody that's in the business world, is see your clients as numbers on a screen. Because the moment you start seeing them as numbers on a screen and not people that you can serve, then the numbers are going to go down and down and down. over a long enough time period. And people are going to take notice of that. So to serve others and to give as much as you can, as much value as possible, is what people are noticing nowadays. I mean, I see time and time again, even with agencies like yourselves, they're putting out content that back in the day where they would have charged thousands of dollars for. You go on YouTube, there's some guys out there that will give a 2 hour long mastermind on content creation, and I'm like, wow, like, 5 years ago I would have had to pay $1,000 for this, and you're giving this
Right.
out for free. And it's like, yeah, why? Because they have something else that they can offer you, but
Yeah.
they're willing to give this to you for free so that you can look at this. And that is a mutual value exchange. I give you this, and in
Yeah.
return, you just come take a look at what I have to offer.
Yeah.
And that is goes so much farther nowadays than just, hey, buy this product, let me sell you this service one time, we're done, leave a good review, goodbye. It's not like that anymore. There's so much
Yeah.
competition. Pretty much every market you look at is going to be saturated to some extent because everybody has access to it now. Everybody can go and try to do these things with the softwares that are coming out. So giving and giving value to people, serving people is probably one of the best marketing strategies that you can do, one of the best sales strategies that you can do. And it works even better if you don't see it as a strategy. You just see it as who you are. And I think that's what you've shown, obviously, in your work and in your time as a musician, now as somebody that teaches other musicians. I have a feeling it's going to continue to grow and pay off long term. And I really appreciate, as a musician myself, although I haven't worked with you, I would say I appreciate what you're doing for an industry that needs it more and more now, with people that are just, without, making fun of anybody, right? Like, artificial, right?
Right.
Everybody's just wanting the easy way out, and you're trying to preserve an art that is slowly and slowly fading away. So hopefully that stays around forever with guys like you leading the charge. So, Chad, I really appreciate your time with us today and sharing those valuable insights, being such a good guy, having a great conversation, and always having a smile on your face, which shows that you not only preach it, but you practice what you preach. With that being said, I want to ask you one last question, and that is, for an aspiring musician, for an aspiring business owner like yourself, what's one piece of advice that you would give them?
Be open to getting help from and learning things from others so that you don't have to learn everything the hard way. Which is what I did in the beginning. Was I had to learn everything the hard way. If you can start earlier and just say, I'm gonna find those that have gone before me that are already where I want to be, and I'm gonna ask them questions. And whoever it is, most people are willing to offer you advice if you ask them. If we just ask them, and then just shorten the curve a bit, get to the fun parts quicker.
Absolutely. What a great piece of advice. Thank you, Chad. Where can we find you?
Oh man, a few places on LinkedIn, just Chad Bourquin. And then
Okay.
we have a website for our agency, generationrelevant.com. And then my coaching is gigsoap.com.
Excellent. We'll put those all in the description on wherever it is that this is going to be posted on, and make sure that people can reach you as a thank you for your time today. And keep doing the good work that you're doing, Chad. Really appreciate your time today, and have a great rest of your day. All right.
Thanks, Sherman.